Welcome back to AM Agenda. Joining me this morning on our panel of politicians, the Labor MP Nick Champion and the Liberal MP Josh Frydenberg. Good morning to you both. Let's start on these reports today about the equal pay test case. The government appears to have backed down when it comes to that after initially promising the unions it would support the case. Its submission to the Fair Pay Commission warned later that that move to pay women more in some sectors would cost a lot and could lead to budget cuts. Nick, can you clarify for us what is the government's position now? Would you prefer to see equality in the workplace, or is the government more worried about the hit on the budget's bottom line?
Well, Ashleigh, these things are always about balance, and this government is balancing a good fiscal position and making sure the budget returns to balance, and obviously the sometimes competing claim of pay equity. But we've got a good record on pay equity. We've introduced parental leave. We actually have this pay equity case before the industrial umpire, and that's a good thing. And when you reflect on how far we've come from the Howard government, where we weren't talking about gender equity in the workforce or pay equity for women, what we were talking about is people losing their penalty rates, losing their conditions, and those people who lost those conditions were predominantly, or the people who were most vulnerable to losing their conditions were predominantly women, predominantly young workers, those at the margins of the workforce. So we've travelled a long way. This government's got a good record. Of course, we want to balance returning the budget to surplus with the pay equity situation, but we've travelled a long way from the dark days of the Howard government.
Josh, what's your take on this? Does the coalition support this test case the unions are putting forward?
Look, there was a Fair Work Australia submission, and this is another embarrassing backflip for the government, and it's a great insight into who's running the government's agenda. In this case, it's the unions. I mean, the unions are less than 20% of the Australian workforce, but are 100% of Labor's front bench, and when it comes to an issue like this, Ashleigh Gillon just doesn't have a spine to take them on. And I just think when you combine this with what happened on the NBN and a number of other issues where they're backflipped on the carbon tax, this government just can't be trusted, Ashleigh.
I just want to quickly get through some other topics that are around today. Nick, today we're going to see more banking executives giving evidence to that Senate inquiry. It's going to be in Canberra today. Over the last few days, we've seen a lot of senior people saying there is already enough competition in the banking sector, slamming Wayne Swan's plans on dumping exit fees, saying there'll be unintended consequences. The Greens, the Independents, the Coalition all have serious concerns, saying the banking reforms don't go far enough. It's not really the reaction the government was hoping for, is it, Nick?
Well, inevitably you get a lot of flack on these issues, but the government's objectives are to secure the sustainability and stability of the banking sector, and we've managed to do that through the biggest global financial crisis in 75 years. We want to empower consumers to make sure that they can make informed choices and make sure that they can switch between banks and get the best deal, and we want to support small lenders. These three aims will help to get Australians a better deal out of their banking sector, but also make sure that our banking sectors are secure for the decades to come, and I think that's a good thing. You'd expect to get a bit of flack from those on the extreme right and those on the extreme left, but our performance during the global financial crisis proves that the government has got a pretty good handle on how to keep the banks safe and how to make sure that consumers get the best deal. So that's our aims. These Senate hearings will obviously hear a lot of different opinions from a lot of different quarters, but the government's objectives are clear and we intend to carry them out.
Josh, what is the coalition planning to do when it comes to the legislation that will end up before the Parliament with Wayne Swan's banking reforms? Obviously, there are a few of these reforms that are similar to Joe Hockey's 9-point plan, and you would expect the coalition to support that. But when it comes to exit fees, will the coalition be voting against a dumping of them? Doesn't that show that you're siding with the big banks? Is that a good look?
Oh, come on, Ashleigh. I mean, what's happened here is that the government's all talk and no action, and the market responded in that way on the day the announcements was made. Big banks' share prices went up dramatically, small banks went down. They promised to introduce competition. They haven't done that. John Simon, who's the head of Aussie Home Loans and was responsible as an architect for bringing greater competition to the sector in the 90s, described in his words these reforms as being pathetic. I mean, pathetic. That's not holding back there. There has been insufficient money put forward for residential mortgage-backed securities. There's no great inquiry into the financial services system, which Joe Hockey called for. I mean, it's been over a decade since the Wallace inquiry. Quite clearly, this is just very piecemeal reform. You get rid of exit fees, you bring in application fees. I mean, Wayne Swan, again, has shown why he's not fit to be Treasurer, Ashleigh.
I'm sure, Nick, there's a lot in there that you would like to respond to. We are going to see a lot more analysis of these banking reforms in the coming weeks and months. And, of course, on Sky News Business today, we will be showing a lot of that Senate inquiry happening in Canberra. I do just quickly, though, Nick, want to ask you about some of your colleagues' comments. Kelvin Thompson says that the former Brumby government in Victoria was too close to big business, that it lost touch with ordinary people, and he's saying that Labor just can't put the defeat we saw in Victoria down to the it's time factor. Do you agree with some of those comments?
Well, Ash, just to go back on the banking reforms, what Josh just confirmed is that the Liberal Party want to keep exit fees, and it's not true to say that our action on exit fees hasn't been effective. Already, banks have been dropping exit fees in anticipation of the government's package.
What have you done for small business? What have you done for small business?
It's already had a big impact on our banking system. But on the Victorian election, look, the Victorian election is principally a matter for Victorians. It was principally fought on law and order and transport and other state issues. Federal politicians will make submissions. Victorian federal politicians will make submissions to the ALP review. You'd expect them to do that. You'd expect them to have a few colourful opinions in there, but I don't think there's much impact on it for the nation or for the federal government.
You're in denial, Nick. You're in denial, Nick.
All right, well, Josh, let's get your take on that, and also we'll let you reply and have another say on the banks, because I'm sure you're fighting to do that.
Well, I mean, just on the banks, I mean, this government had a great opportunity. Joe Hockey laid out a 9-point plan, took the initiative on this agenda, on this issue. The government was playing catch-up, and
yes, but what will you do about exit fees?
Okay, let's just go back to the Victorian election, Josh.
In terms of the Victorian election, as a Victorian, I've got a very strong view, and Kelvin Thompson made some very telling comments, particularly around the planning failures of the Brumby government and of Justin Madden's hopeless performance in that planning portfolio, and how high-density living in the suburbs was having a great impact on people's approach to their government. And I think there's some telling lessons for Julia Gillard out of Labor's stunning defeat in Victoria, not least of which was the waste of money. In Victoria, we had Mikey, which was a ticketing system which wasted nearly $1.5 billion. We had a desalination plant which had massive cost overruns. And what have we seen at the federal level? We've seen the BER program, we've seen the Pink Bats program, we've seen the green loans. We're going to get the cash for clunkers. I mean, there's this massive waste. The second thing is John Brumby ran, Ashleigh, a very negative campaign. A very negative campaign. And that's all we've heard from Julia Gillard in this last term of Parliament.
That's rich coming from the Liberals.
It's 100 days.
It's
100 days tomorrow. It's 100 days tomorrow since Julia Gillard has been re-elected, and we just have not seen a positive agenda. You are fighting fires in every part of your
nonsense.
Okay,
Josh,
a final word for Nick, because there are a few things there. Very quickly, Nick Champion, we do need to go off in about 30 seconds or so.
On the last week of Parliament, we saw the breakup of Telstra and the biggest piece of microeconomic reform in telecommunications in 25 years. So it's impossible to say that this government is not being positive, not getting on with the job. It's the Liberals who are wrecking and stopping and attempting to stop the progress of the nation.
You're criticising your own side.
Okay, I think we're being slightly merging off track this morning. Nick Champion, Josh Frydenberg, thank you both for your insights this morning. Look forward to chatting with you again in the new year about all of these issues that, of course, will be dominating Parliament in 2011. That's all we do have time for this edition of AM Agenda. There is more politics ahead, though, today. You can join David Lipson at 12:30 Eastern for Lunchtime Agenda, and Kieran Gilbert will be along at 4:15 Eastern for PM Agenda. For now, I'm Ashleigh Gillon. Thanks for your company this morning.